Good afternoon and welcome to the Pasco Public Facilities District Board meeting. Agenda packets are available on the City of Pasco's website at www.pasco-wa.gov under the Public Facilities District Board webpage. This meeting is being televised live on PSC-TV channel 191 on Spectrum Cable in Pasco and Richland, and is streamlined on the city's Facebook page, website, YouTube channel, and Microsoft Teams. Lastly, the public may submit their comments and/or questions by contacting the city clerk. So I'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. And recognition of visitors, public comments. Is there anybody out there on the World Wide Web that's...
No, but
Nope.
we might want to call roll.
Oh, I'm going to... Okay, I'll go back to item number one. Item number one, call to order and roll call. So I did the call to order. So please, Debbie, would you take the roll?
Great. Caroline Bowdish.
I'm here on the phone.
Thank you. Leonard Dietrich.
Yes.
Marie Gillespie.
Here.
Spencer Gillette.
Here.
And Mark Morissette.
Present.
Great.
Agenda item number 3, approval of minutes from our October 25th, 2022 meeting.
I move they be approved as sent.
And it's been moved to be approved as sent to us. Is there a second?
Second.
So it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor of approval of the meeting minutes as presented, please signify by saying aye.
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 Okay, the motion carries. Item number 4 and 5 deal with claims approval and the financial report, which will be next monthly meeting. And agenda item number 6, the reports from committees. And so we don't have any committees quite in place yet, but item number 7, old business, the interlocal agreement and bridge loan update. Zach Ratkai.
Pass this out. All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I got a little bit of a cough, so I will just talk as softly as I can. It's an update on the interlocal agreement. As of last night, we finished a draft interlocal agreement, which really is an update of the original one from 2013. In this interlocal agreement, it goes into a little bit more detail in section 2 about services provided by the city, updating a little bit more on, say, section 2, subsection 4 on the second page, about the finance director and serving as financial officer for the district. Duties to include preparing quarterly and annual financial reports, claims, revenue expense reports, much like what we do now. Just went into a little bit further detail. But we also put this up as under the direction of the district. The city finance office can certainly assist in coordinating the bond application and process, establishing the operation of revenue funding and accounting for the city once the aquatic center gets into place as well. So this is updated to include finance. In our discussion with the finance manager about the PFD, we had looked at one of our staff accountant requests to city council would be devoted 20 hours a week directly to the PFD. So that's going to be a position, since this is taking off, that would certainly help. Therefore, in section 3, payment of services, the PFD previously was paying, or is currently paying, the city $1,000 a month. Lawyer. And we put in tentatively $5,000 a month for those administrative costs to the city to offset that. That is pending approval of an additional accountant position at the city, and what 50% of those salary and benefits would be on a monthly basis, prorated for that. So that would be calculated out in that area as well. So this has been forwarded on to the city attorney, which, according to this interlocal agreement, is the attorney for both the PFD and the city. So that will be under review, but we wanted to get it out to the group today for review prior to the December meeting. So, and for board member Bowdish, we will make sure that we get a copy to you over email or as soon as possible.
Okay, thank you.
So on the ILA, I'll take any quick off-the-cuff questions, knowing that a review of it will need, and then I can talk about an update from finance on the bridge loan.
Is there, is this something that needs
Accountant as well. So I think we need the time too, along with your review as well.
All right, very good.
Question.
Go ahead, Spence.
Zach, is that the 5,000 a month is basically a fluid number right now
Yes.
because of that? In addition to that 5,000 a month, we will be billed for legal fees, legal services.
Yep.
Were there any other additional costs that you mentioned?
Nothing additional. Working with Director Watkins here, we'd like to identify a predictive budget. Well, that's going into the bridge loan process here. We don't identify any additional costs. I think the $1,000 a month, covered just the staff liaison since 2013. But because there's going to be some significant financial workings and accounting, particularly if you start getting into the bonding process, we felt to bump that up was at least something that the city would send over to the PFD for review and approval. We would like to iron out that number if it's any more or any less, though. And we can work with your director on that and have him liaison that to the board.
Any more questions, comments for Zach? Go ahead, Leonard.
Yeah, the 20 hours a week, you came up with that?
That was just what I got from the finance director. Was
Okay.
That was their intent with that additional accountant position, should it be approved.
Perhaps it would also be helpful to note, suggesting that December have a bit of a theme to it and actually invite finance department, introduce them in a way that we, in fact, say we introduced Public Works at the last meeting. You've been using their services, but to actually introduce them more formally and talk about the scope and that, I think would be a timely topic for December discussion.
Very good. So Zach, you're going to go ahead with the bridge loan update then, please?
Yes. So as I stated in the previous month, we are still working through the biennial budget process with finance for the citywide budget for both operating and capital. But working since the last meeting with the finance staff, we have a couple of questions we want to pose to the board, or at least put out on the table. We would look at a loan that we're determining right now that to cover the rest of 2022. The bulk of this expense was the election costs to the county, but we would look to have the PFD request coverage of about $210,000. That is in the hole essentially right now for the PFD board. And then I will work with Director Watkins on sort of a predictive budget for the first quarter of 2023 to see what the remainder of that loan would be. The process with City Finance Department is that the PFD would request through resolution to the City Council a loan of a certain identified amount, and then would take that resolution through the finance process to the City Council to get that approved through that area. One thing we're looking at answers for, not necessarily from this board, I think just mainly from our finance practices, is which money, first the term of the loan would be through the end of 2024. That would be our budget cycle. So looking at the amount of loan plus a monthly payment or a quarterly payment to the city based upon bond or sales tax revenue from the PFD would certainly be something that we would need to look at to make sure that that is feasible. We would also have to see which type of work would have to be funded from which type of revenue that the PFD has. So if the city is providing a loan and we've got work for design, architectural, engineering, and construction, would that be required to be paid back through bond revenue? Whereas operational, whether it's legal fees, city operations, contract salary to the director, would that have to be paid out of sales tax revenue, which wouldn't be hitting the coffers until April 1st. So those are some of the answers that we're exploring and seeking out here at the city. I'm trying to see what else we have here. So a little bit of information there. And next month with the finance theme of the meeting, I think we'll be able to have that resolution in place and work with the director on that.
Then, in regards to the finance department, will we be accruing that 20 hours a week from now until the first of the year to get into the new cycle? Or how will that be done, or would we pay it out?
That's a position that was put in with the new budget for city council approval. So there still is work from finance staff that would be accruing. The preparation of reports and that sort of thing. But as far as like the specific, pass through pay to a staff member, that would have to, staff member would have to be hired, established, and
I'm speaking specifically of the finance department, which they are already in hand, or are they planning on hiring another person and they would be at that 20 hours?
yeah, they're planning on hiring. That position has been proposed in the budget to be approved by council. So that staff member has not officially been approved, but that's the intent.
Okay, if there's no other discussion, then we can go to item number 8, Regional Aquatics Facility Show and Tell by Matt. But before you start, go ahead, Matt.
And I actually, just on the previous subject, because I think there will be another theme or opportunity probably in January, I'll make the suggestion that the PFD go visit the city council. They haven't done it for a bit of time and would probably be timely in the January timeframe to go and talk with council, or December, depending on how this bonding and this ILA, or excuse me, the bridging loan and the ILA go. Maybe an opportunity to go.
Yes, if we could maybe visit about that a little bit later. I'm not so sure I'm ready for it, to tell you the truth.
As a possibly in December or January is my point.
Well, January would be better than December, but I just got some things health-wise I gotta work through. And if somebody else wants to give the presentation, it may be a little easier, but
We can work through that.
yes, please. Thank
And
you.
back to your question, sir.
Okay, my question. So what I wanted to do is, I think this is looking forward to this presentation, and I just wanted to pass out to the board members here, and I'll get. So I wanted to just point out before Matt starts his presentation, this is a copy of the facilities amenities that was back, I think it was the 2016 feasibility study. And, okay, sorry. And then I think what would be very helpful if we start to come up with some sort of I don't want to call it necessarily a site plan or a vision for the aquatics facility. And so what we're going to start learning from Matt's presentation, and I just want to point out that this facilities amenities that I passed out to you back from that 2016, that you see on this map, this amenities piece of paper here, it's like the parking lot takes up half of it. And for phase 1, there's the indoor leisure pool and the outdoor leisure pool, and those are really the only 2 amenities that are on this. And then phase 2 has the lap pool. So what I'm looking forward to is that hopefully from the presentation from Matt and a reminder of what was given to us by the consultants, that we can start putting something together so that Matt can get out there and start having those community meetings. We've come up with our vision. So that's all that this is really about, you folks. So with that, then Matt, going to go ahead and turn the meeting over to you. And do you want us to interrupt you as you're giving the presentation or save our questions to the end? What would be?
Both would be fine. I have been on a tour I've been on a tour to see all of these facilities, so I have 50 slides here, which I'll go through as fast as I can. If they say a picture is worth 1,000 words, I'm going to have it about 50,000 words here.
It's a lot of words, so yes.
to
Well, we
share.
look forward to this.
And do ask questions along the way. And
Great.
Great segue too, because your principle about parking lot and facility being about half and half, I found that fairly consistent, and you'll probably see that in a couple of the details I have here in slides. What I did is talking with board members and also what we've been talking about in the community for years. What would be the ideal comparator facility? Is there another facility already built out there, ideally in Washington State, that we might be able to compare to? And I'll jump to the end of the answer. I think is very solidly yes. So looking at facilities that would be about 25 to 50 million that are run year round, mostly outdoors, maybe have some outdoor space during the summer, that are publicly owned, municipally governed, ideally, have a recreational aquatics focus, if not necessarily a singular focus, and either in Washington State or the Pacific Northwest. And realizing that some of these don't tick quite all of the boxes, but if you had the perfect scenario, I actually have a list up here. The two that I went and visited and had, frankly, the best time with was in Linwood, Washington, at their recreation center, and then follow that by Snohomish, and then I haven't visited this entire list, but have included them in some details for comparison and contrasting. What I want to do is dive in and show you some pictures of what they've done in other places. This is an artist's rendering of the Linwood Recreation Center. Linwood was built as a pool. The part that you see with the open part, the pool existed since the 70s, but in 2011, they spent about $25 million, I've got the number here in a second, to upgrade it and add a fun side or a performance side, and also a community space and also some workout facilities and that sort of thing. This picture, artist rendering, I know that we've been trying to imagine what we could have as a facility, and I'm hopeful between these will get helpful to our cause. That's an actual picture of what Linwood is like. It's hard to take a picture of Linwood because it's the way it's nestled, but it's actually fairly close to the artist rendering. The front of it, and here's what it actually exists, and realize though, so that is a 10-year-old facility now. A couple of specs here I mentioned about the 1970s pool. It's a 45,000 square foot facility. In 2011, they spent $25 million to upgrade in its entirety. That's equivalent to about $33 million in today's dollars. I also did a real basic estimate too. They're in a little tight quarters, and I estimated that the parking lot and the facility took up about 4.6 acres. They're a little bit of the more compressed on some of these examples that I'll show. Also, I thought was kind of helpful and interesting is they're in a campus arrangement. Right next to them is, I believe, the senior center to the south. They have a fire station. Just down the street, next stop is a city hall. So they have sort of a campus, municipal campus approach. They also, pending also from the last discussion too, was what contracting models did these other organizations use? This particular one used GCCM, and the theme that I also got out of it was, regardless of what contracting model you do, the successful facilities did have the owners become versed in how facilities be built and be a very involved partner in that process, regardless of whether it's traditional design, build, hybrid, or GCCM model. They also were LEED Silver certified, so they have some energy efficiencies. They also have some hassles with that as well too. You pick and choose if you want to be how energy efficient you want to be. These folks were very helpful. Bill Haugen, the facility manager, and Joel Faber invited me with open arms, gave me copies of materials. We'll give more, going to give some updates of their budgeting, and took me on a tour of their facility. As you walk in the front door, you go through a fairly good-sized lobby, and if you go in this little nook area, you'll see the right side, which is the fun side, or they call it the fun side, it'd be the recreation side. And we go to another picture. This is actually the fun side, and through those windows, that's the swim side, the competitive pool. And I'm going to just actually nail some of the actual amenities that they have. In this case, they have a children's area. This is a nice shallow area. This bucket fills up every couple of minutes, tips over on the kids. That's a very popular attraction. They also have a couple of guns that they can aim and point water with. And they said this family hot tub, which is one of two in the facility, is kept at a lower temperature so that you can have younger children in a hot tub with grandparents, or parents can be in there and watch their younger kids in there. And actually, this is a reverse angle of the hot tub. The key to Linwood is this is a fairly small space at 45,000 square feet. They've packed a lot of amenities into a small space. Lazy River, and here's one angle of it. This lazy river is actually the largest I saw of the facilities. Instead of, a lot of facilities will just have one of these and maybe a little vortex. They've got more off here to the left, and there is more to it than that. Very popular use, the floating around on a lazy river with an inner tube, parking in a center talking with folks. I also included the lifeguards in this particular case, or in a control center. They still do roaming and they have them out on the floor, but this control space works for both sides of the fun side and the swimming side. And it's also, it's not humid like the rest of the pool is. So there will be lifeguards in here and then lifeguards out. They also have an outdoor space, and believe it or not, in the summer months, they open these doors here, and it kind of creates an inside-outside sense of inside-outside. And there are kids that actually use the outside toys, or will go out and sit on the bench and have a lunch and that sort of thing. And their feature, of course, is these two slides that both go exit the building and then come back in. One of them you body slide on. One of them you have to have an inner tube, and then they have some height requirements for that. They noted they were very, very happy that they did two slides instead of one. It was just a little bit more expense because you had to have a little wider runoff area, but they used essentially the same set of stairs, and it didn't cost a whole lot more to do two slides. So very popular amenity there. I do have I tried to take a couple of videos, so I do have a video, and this is a gentleman who he's the kind of guy you would love to have in charge of the back end of your facility, Bill Haugen. And where's my mouse? I am at the Linwood Aquatics Center, and we have our guest here who's going to tell us about their lazy river.
So if we look over this way, you can see our lazy river. Back in design, I asked that we get as much of a river as we can get and as wide of a river as we can get. The longer and wider your river can be, the more usable it becomes for programming. This way you can do fitness classes in it, you can do your recreational swim. It's big enough to get lessons in. It can turn on and off features to create different dynamics for different programming, spray features and the like. For us, the longer and the wider the better. The river has been incredibly useful.
I am at the Linwood Aquatic. I'm hoping this is helpful. Was this wonderful? Switching over to the swim side, they have I believe that's a half-length pool. This is a thing they had originally had in the 70s. The roof does open up. They're able to open up to an extent and get direct sunlight on the swimming area. Apparently that's very popular. And I did take a picture. He told me afterwards that this area is probably the most used amenity in the whole facility. It does have an on-ramp if you have a wheelchair. A lot of elderly folks doing water aerobics in that section of the pool.
Matt, quick question. Is that a 25-meter pool?
I believe it's a half half length and not a full length. I didn't measure.
Well,
it.
full length could be 50 meters.
It's probably, I believe it's a 25 meter.
Okay,
I didn't measure and ask specifically though, but it looks to me not to be a full length pool. They also have a variety of recreation rooms and party rooms. All of the facilities did say pizza parties and birthday parties, parents, it's a good value for parents to come in, have a birthday celebration for their kid, and helps their operational revenues. So they're both Snohomish and Linwood are very keen on that. Or the facilities, in this case, some of them are workout facilities, some of them are dance areas. There's even one leftover racquetball court that they have at this place. Back into things, they've got all manner of mechanical stuff, and I'm not going to be able to go into excruciating detail. I just learned. I can tell you the Snohomish one's is a beautiful looking back end facility, and it's also a little bit different. These guys are a chlorine-based system throughout the whole facility. Snohomish is going to be a salt water for most of it, and that requires a different equipment set. And again, Snohomish is going to be a newer facility, and we'll show it next. Really quick walk
Back
through.
room,
5
controllers.
zones.
variable pumps. They have 5 zones of water.
There is a subfloor.
PE filter types. And back room.
Bill could have spent 2 hours telling me all the details of the back room. Couple of details, just want to highlight the examples of the extra attention the folks in Linwood gave us. They mentioned their security or their safety program, that if somebody bunks their head or breaks a back or something, or something less serious, they have a series of buttons and procedures that if they push certain buttons, pumps will go on and off. It will communicate and enunciate who should show up. So they've put a lot of thought into these various switches on the wall. And they also, I heard a common theme too about the lighting. It's not fun changing lights over pools, so they have these things that essentially are like lightsabers from Star Wars. The light source is here, but it casts a nice beam out all the way. They were the ones who mentioned go through every single detail when you build a facility as the owner and understand it. And I think they also gave an example of some things that they had wished they had done better. Their locker room isn't wide enough for a gurney to go in if they have a 911 call. Fairly narrow benches. They wish they could have done this over and wish they had spent a little more time working actually through the design details as owners of this process. They had some initial difficulty, I think, with the air handling system. Once they got it sorted out, I think there was maybe even a lawsuit. They ended up using what are called socks. So these are like giant neoprene covers that fill with air, and you don't have to clean the ducts quite as often. Also, common theme I heard is the locker rooms in general, whether or not you do it one person at a time or you do family locker rooms, there's a magic mix. And they said that, they actually said Snohomish got locker rooms better than they did. So I'll show you some of their examples. Some of my takeaways, at the end of it, when you do the facility, what's the facility going to be about? Is it going to be about doing competitive swimming? Is it going to be about doing recreational swims with family? Is it going to be about swim lessons? That's going to dictate a lot of the design. So it's besides picking your amenities, what do you think your facility is going to do now and in the future? And then how you design it comes from that. They pointed out too that they did public outreach 17 times, not all before the building. Some of it was the middle of it and after it. But they said it was very important, and they were successful because they did reach out to the public many, many, many times. They also said go bigger than you think you want if you can do it. They also said don't build a pool first and do the rec side second. And I said we're talking about the rec side first, pool second, and they said much better way to go. As I mentioned too, that Snohomish, I said I was going to go visit them, and they said, yeah, they came and got our plans, which we gladly gave, and they've refined some things and are better in some ways. which takes me then to the Snohomish Aquatic Center. It's about 30 miles away, a little bit more rural of a community up I-5. It's just a great shot at night. Notice how they have one slide. They wish they had 2 slides. Thought that was kind of a nice note. I have the chunk of property. In this case, they have a ton of property. I believe that's like 12 acres total. It was formerly a middle school that they knocked down. The actual footprint of the facility in the parking lot is closer to 5 acres in this scenario. If I measured things right, through this overflow parking probably takes it up more close to 7. They're a more rural place where they have houses generally surrounding it. In their case, it was $22 million in 2014, which is about $28 million in today's dollars. Initially they were considering a GCCM arrangement, but they went design, bid, build because they had some difficulties of some sort early on, and so they ended up doing a design, bid, build. It was also a school district who did it too, and so they're a little bit different than, say, a city or a PFD, probably their needs. As you walk the building, I noticed, to me, it looks like a little bit like a school walking up to the front of it. It's got a little bit of a different design. Their front lobby area, they've done a remarkably good job. In this case, they do have somebody who's selling some merchandise, and you can get a cup of coffee in the front, so they do have a little space there. They also have room for folks, if you have an open swim and you have 300 people waiting. In Linwood, they have to wait outside. In Snohomish, they're able to wait inside. And they said that's an important consideration to think about. In this case, what was striking is from the lobby, if you look, this is the recreation areas past the first batch of glass, and then there's a second batch of glass where the competitive swim area is, and then a third batch out the back. Shot of the overall recreational area. I kind of took away that the kids area was a little bit of a copy of the Linwood section. There is a single hot tub in this scenario. They also, instead of having a ramp for wheelchairs, have a lift. They had 2 lifts actually for wheelchairs for ADA compliance. Their lifeguards do more of a roving situation, and they have radios. Looks a little bit like Linwood in my thought, and they were talking about doing a second one. Whoops. They have a flow rider in this place, and if I remember right, there are flow riders in 2 places in Washington State. They're in Chelan. It is fairly expensive in that it's about $40,000 this year for the maintenance on it. They do say that it brings in folks to come try it out, and also a group of folks that will go from facility to facility and are professionals and attract crowds. So there's a bit of a flow rider surfing circuit, at least regionally. I thought that was kind of interesting. Didn't have it running while I was there, but these things vary from $500,000 to $5 million. So flow riders are expensive, but they are definitely a wow factor. They also have party rooms too. Again, supplement their income. They were very happy with their operational budget. I didn't get a copy of it. That's pending, but they seem to be pretty happy with the way things are going. The competitive swim side, this very much is a competitive swim facility. Banners up from local high schools. They also draw from Seattle. This also is not a full-length pool, and just kind of you can kind of see it. It's got a bit of a college or high school vibe for the competition on swimming. And the gentleman in this facility.
Public in 2014, January 17th, and we have been operating almost at full capacity since then. It took us a while to get going, but now we keep having to expand our hours and days and to accommodate all the business, both in the community and our region.
And my understanding is that a large chunk of this is running salt water.
Yes, we are running saltwater and both our rec pool and our competition pool. We use a company called TMI, and they've been our backbone to this system since we were built.
And we're in the competitive side right now. You had a large competitive group involved in the design process for this facility at the beginning.
Yes, long-standing community people that have been involved with the school district the previous building that the school district owned. They were involved with bringing the kids in and getting them basically learning how to swim. We live around a lot of lakes and rivers. And so our objective as a school district is make sure every second grader gets the opportunity to have free swim lessons. And so that kind of built on that, and they got the swim teams going, developed a heck of a great state swim group. But the facility hadn't been taken care of.
Realizing I'm taking up a fair amount of time, I want to go forward on this. Mechanical, this place, everything from where I was standing, you can see essentially all of it. And he was pretty proud of that because they didn't have to require 2 people to be in the room for OSHA requirements, 1 person at a time. And a little bit more advanced equipment, probably more expensive. But he said once you get it dialed in, it works out well. Saltwater, he's a couple of bugaboos there. Didn't have it sorted out to begin with, so some stainless steel had some corrosion on it. He mentioned that their acoustic panels were phenomenal. It was a very quiet. I was surprised how quiet it was for as much sound as could be bouncing around. Takeaways, a little bit different. Alternative to Linwood, it wasn't as dense as Linwood. It to me felt like it had more space. It was the right amount of space for the amenities they had. A little bit more square footage than Linwood. Probably a little bit less use is my guess, but I didn't get the numbers exactly on that. Snohomish and Linwood, I think, are very much models that Pasco could use for its facility. This is the kind of facility I think we could afford and could do in Pasco. That said, I did visit a couple others. I went to North Clackamas Aquatic Center. This one was built in the 90s. It's, again, each site's going to have a different case. This one has a lot of parking, but it's also near Clackamas Mall and a community college. $7 million back then, $50 million in today's dollars. It's pretty good size, but their operations budget's different because they're based on their property taxes. Their park district is different than a PFD model. Inside looks a little bit more dated. What's nice about the facility is one giant open space. Over here is the swimming pool competitive area. There is a wave pool in this section. And then this is more the kiddie area. Here's sort of me standing right about here to see the competitive side. Again, a short side. It's not a full-length pool, therapy pool. And they have 2 slides in this case, or yeah, two or 3 slides. Fairly popular. There wasn't a lot of activity when I was there that day. I also stopped off at Boardman. I was not able to get numbers of Clackamas, much more detailed than that. It was a much shorter visit. The other thing I did visit, though, was on the way back. Boardman, just down the road from us, has a 41,000 square foot facility. And they built theirs for $13 million a few years ago. And I'd say it's more like the equivalent of this design. Not a lot of amenities in it. It's got a lot of space to it. But it's also a fairly small community being served. So I didn't get a full-on tour of this place, but this is in our own backyard, and this is another example. I'm hoping that between the pictures of these, you get an idea of what we might be able to do for a facility. Another couple of shots of Boardman. I also went to the YMCA Rotary
Matt, do
Aquatic
they
Center.
have a competitive pool in Boardman?
Boardman, I didn't look at that. I didn't see.
I see lane markers, but that looks like
swimming lanes, but no, not a competitive. No. I also visited the YMCA on the way at one trip. They've got a couple of slides outside. They do have a swimming. It's not. It could be used for competition. The majority, though, of the YMCA is a workout facility, and the other half of it. So you would imagine just doing this half of it. And got to put up Great Wolf Lodge. I don't know if anybody's been there before, and it's been a number of years, but this is a totally different critter. However, that's a pretty deluxe wave pool, and the slides and everything are pretty big wow factors. So if you were to have a casino and want to do a hotel and a convention center, then the Great Wolf Lodge might be a bit more of an example. But hopefully comparing and contrasting some of these amenities, you get a sense of what's out there. Finally, not when I visited, but I did not only pull up some details from the internet, but I interviewed my sister and her husband and my nephew that were very helpful, and they've been to every one of these facilities. And they spoke highly of Slidewaters Water Park, which of course is a outdoor facility. It's privately owned. So it doesn't check all of the boxes, but there's probably some important lessons there, and I would love to go visit when they're open. They have a lazy river. They have a competitive slide. I guess races on the slides are very fun. It's going 3-wide racing down this chute is a heck of a lot of fun. They have volleyball, or you can rent cabanas. They have a variety of things that you can do in the summer months, but nothing to speak of on the inside. And a very large flow rider, I think, that first shot. That is a massive flow rider system. Definitely the crown jewel of that thing. So with that, showing you some facilities. I have some additional details. You probably saw the reports. I have more pictures if you want to see more. What I got from this trip is our Snohomish and Linwood in particular are like Pasco and very helpful. And they were talking about the details of what things you want to do as owners and do invest in understanding all the details. Locker rooms are hard. They mentioned that getting the air handling, the noise attenuation can be difficult at the beginning, but once you got it set, it works out. Absolutely have pizza parties and birthdays in rooms and rent them out and to offset your operational costs. And also, if you can create a sense of space with a cabana or a cubby somewhere or a lock on a thing, it helps out as well. That is a distillation of what I've done for the past couple of weeks in touring, and hopefully gives you a little bit of an idea of what we might be able to do in Pasco. Questions, comments?
Snohomish and Linwood are in western Washington, and how would perhaps what goes on in western Washington differ from what we might do here in eastern Washington?
I would say Linwood because it is in the proximity of Seattle and has a lot of larger, it itself is probably a similar sized city to Pasco, but it's got a lot similar sized cities near it on the I-5 corridor. Snohomish is probably more analogous to Tri-Cities in that it's not nearly as large as any of the 3 Tri-Cities, and it's 30 miles outside of the area. I think its density is more like the Tri-Cities. I felt more like eastern Washington and Snohomish than I certainly did in Linwood or Seattle. Does that give you a little sense?
Yes.
Vince?
Just a quick question. You said Snohomish got their locker rooms correct. What did they do different?
They took a cue from Linwood and went through when they did their design process. Their actual owners went through and said, "Show me a plan. How many inches is that bench? How?" And they also talked about owners' representatives too. They had either a champion that was knowledgeable in how to build a facility that was on staff or on the board, or that they hired to go through every little excruciating detail on how to design a facility. And locker rooms apparently is the acid test for an aquatics facility. So they learned lessons from Linwood is what I heard from Linwood and from Snohomish.
In viewing these and through the evolution of a couple of decades of construction and moving up to Snohomish is probably the newest.
Yes.
And the amenities that are in there, you could see them changing through the periods of time. And Snohomish, how did you feel about the acceptance to the community and to the customers?
Yeah, Snohomish, because it is through the school district, there is very much a focus on competitive swimming and learning to swim. I thought Linwood was maybe more seniors and recreational for kids. So there's a little bit of a difference in the main focus. That all said, I think that the community in both cases was very much behind the building of the facility and very involved in it. I didn't ask all this different constituents groups that were involved, but there was a list for each of them that they involved. Then I would imagine that we have that here, or could develop that, or highlight that in some way. Did I answer your question, Leonard?
Are there more places you're going to visit, or?
Well, I cast my net to the Pacific Northwest. I don't think there's anything else in Washington State, with the exception of maybe something in Spokane, but I did, there is a similar size facility, but of the 3 people I talked with, they said that frankly, they didn't think it was good as Linwood or Snohomish. Yeah, I can go, if we want to go to Provo, Utah. I heard there is an excellent one in Provo, but I didn't want to start spending all your money too much. So I went cast a net for the Pacific Northwest, or at least what I could get to in a day. I did also mention there is stuff in the Midwest that could be interesting, but that's, we have to fly out to those kinds of things.
And your feeling for the size of the property and how it was managed, Lakewood, kind of smushed in there, in.
Yeah, Linwood's a little smushed. Way they have going for it is that's part of a larger city campus. Took a lot of pictures. Probably would have been easier for me. There we go. Oh. This is a major arterial, and you see essentially there's a parking lot on this side. You can drive up the front of it, or there's a shared parking lot with a senior center to the south. So there's not a ton of parking there. I think they have some overflow across the street, but they've crammed this into 4.6 acres is the way I measured 400 some feet by 500 some feet and did my best job to estimate. So their 4.6 acres in this case is a little tight, but they have a lot of things inside their buildings. And then Snohomish, the way I am back room. Snohomish, by contrast, what I did is I measured this area right here, including these parking lots, and excluded this in the larger chunk, and that came up to a little larger at 5.2 acres. So 4, 5 acres, or 6 potentially, as we're talking about, seems to be doable. It depends if you have some shared parking with some other entities, though, I think.
It just seems that if you kind of smash it or smoosh it together on if you're trying to put 6 pounds of spuds in a 5-pound sack, it doesn't look as nice and as attractive as maybe 5 pounds of spuds in a 6-pound sack.
Or maybe just to borrow the analogy, Linwood had a 5-pound sack and they added a second 5-pound sack, where they got to start off with a fresh 10-pound sack in Snohomish. So they're a little more efficient.
So it's certainly important to make sure that the size is adequate, and we're not trying to squish it into something that it doesn't really fit, but it'll be okay.
Yes.
Matt, did they talk to you about how long it took to design and build these?
The Snohomish went through some fits and starts because they had some issues with wastewater and water source and some other stuff. I got the impression that they tended to be a 2 to 2.5 year process when they actually got full blown into design. It was and then construction a 2 to 2.5 year period.
And did they express any satisfaction or dissatisfaction with their contracting type?
Yes, they did, and they also discussed on the different ways to do it. And the theme though that I did here, it wasn't necessarily the contract type; it was the investment as an owner in learning and being an equal partner in the process. That was, I heard that at three of the 4 places that I visited, directly and specifically.
Did they all have owners reps?
I think one of them did. Linwood had actually call her a champion. I have a call in. She's retired from the city of Linwood. They suggested strongly that I call her and contact her. She's not called back yet. In her case, she was a fervent champion of this and had the technical expertise to do it as well. In Snohomish, I believe they had a buyer's representative or owner's representative through that process.
Okay. Yeah, I'm wondering, the concept of a buyer's rep is a good one. And I can easily see that being a full-time job or more.
In fact, that's when we get done with this part of the agenda, I have that on another part of the agenda. I wanted to talk about that just a little bit too.
Yeah, but I also don't know how you'd find someone with that particular experience, because these kinds of things aren't built every day.
He wasn't fishing for a job, and I don't know what his availability is. However, I think Mr. Haugen, for example, is coming towards the end of a career with the city, and this gentleman here he fit the mold of of being passionate, having knowledge and interest in all of these things. I thought he could fit that kind of role fairly well.
Oh, great.
So I actually did get approached by somebody here in the community who's interested in that as well. I'll get him to talk about it here in a bit.
Did they get into any detail and concerns about traffic flow in, flow out, times of day, those kind of things as far as moving traffic?
Yeah, Snohomish, I didn't get the impression was a problem. I wasn't there when they were super busy. Linwood did note that the day they opened or redid their thing, and that they were been full ever since, and that they've had difficulty because everybody has to be outside. People would drive by and they weren't sure if they could get in or not. So there's been high demand on Linwood, and they wished they could have done it bigger back then, but they couldn't. I'm not sure that it was much traffic issue, although their parking lot, I'm sure if they were full up at their 300 or so, people were going to be full as well. So it depended on the facility. Snohomish was flush with parking. Clackamas was flush with parking as well. Boardman, not a problem either. So I think it depends on the density issue. Linwood being more of a Seattle area is going to have some density issues.
The one that I toured a few years ago in Palm Desert area had a large parking area, and so access was really comfortable as far as getting in and moving around, those kind of things.
Just rule of thumb, if you look at this parking lot, to me it seems like slightly less than the equivalent of the whole building. So maybe they're a little light on parking, just as kind of as an acid test compared to what we've seen here.
I'm curious, did they tell you whether or not they can support their operating costs?
I wanted to have more of that. I don't have those specific details. I'm still waiting on those from all the facilities, although Snohomish were very happy about their operational costs. I just don't know the specific numbers. And they're also a school district, so it may be a slightly different model on how they do their things. So my intent is to follow up with specific details on that, but did run out of time. I couldn't quite get everything here tonight.
So the school district actually built the Snohomish facility?
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So, again, ideal would have been a public facilities district, but there's not one in Washington that's built an aquatics facility that I know of yet, with the exception of maybe Spokane. So I need to do some follow-up with Spokane as well, at least on paper.
Isn't Spokane's new facility more of a basketball track kind of facility?
Yeah.
And isn't that a PFD?
I think it is a PFD.
But I don't know that it has an aquatics.
It's not nearly as much as aquatics is what I was being
Yeah.
told. Yeah. With that, I hope the pictures have been helpful.
Yes.
Hopefully you can imagine, if you were to build either a Linwood or a Snohomish facility with drawing from the inspiration of the others, Pasco would have a tremendous facility just using those as models, and possibly surpass them with newer wow factor and later technology.
So from what you've have seen and from what you've learned, what becomes our next step?
That's a good question. And last month when we talked about the different contract models and we need to keep talking about the things that need to get us to say February, to where we get some of the basics sorted out. I think the question of whether or not to look into an owner's representative, I think that's coming up. Finding a perfect person who has the technical detail that I don't have, who could help this group go through and build one of these facilities. I think that's something we should work on.
Is there somebody locally, an architect firm or individual that could kind of help us to move to the next step of at least some sort of visualization?
I think there is locally and regionally. I got a cold call from one locally and had a nice talk with them. I think there are others out there. I've not spent time doing that, but that's actually I wanted, if you don't mind, I'll flow into that part of the agenda. Sure. Would like to, I've been accumulating lists of constructors, architects, owners' representatives, and that sort of thing. And I'm keep working on that. I think the owner's rep is something that we need to do, maybe a request for qualifications and consider bringing somebody on earlier than later is my suggestion. And if I can find possible talent locally or regionally and bring them a list of names and details for the next meeting in December, that was my hope, and that you would want that.
Okay, I'm not exactly sure in my mind exactly what the next step is, but
Well, what did our draft schedule say we were going to do next?
That's another good question. And I don't have a good solid answer for that other than generally. The schedule I had did not have an owner's representative listed specifically on it, but I think it's in that general area of gathering expertise to help us build a facility.
I agree. I think we're going to need someone to help us even write the statement of work once we decide on the contract model.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm going to transition over there to go
Very
to the
good.
rest of the agenda.
yes.
Okay, I'll leave that one there.
Okay.
And would you like to go in order of the agenda, Mr. Chair? Okay.
Yes, please do.
Well, I did the show and tell, or the market research, and there was a question pending about board committee suggestions from the last meeting. And I want to keep this fairly simple, knowing that your time is valuable and that you have different expectations on the board. I thought of the reasons why you would have a committee, and that I essentially came down with two thoughts. If you have a particular task or an issue or a subject that needs review or examination that's not expedient or convenient for the full board to consider it, that probably is something that's best left to a committee. You also have board members with certain expertise and experience or interest that might benefit from doing a committee. The idea, though, that often in public organizations you need to have equal number of people on committees, I would suggest that you don't need to worry about that. That if you have a particular person that has an interest or expertise, or there's a particular need that is a group, if you can foresee it and say we're going to have this thing coming up, and board member X, could you work on it? Even a committee of one would be helpful. For example, I think it's pretty clear, Mr. Morissette, you have financial experience and auditing experience, so something that were to come up in that area, I would hope that you would want to be involved with that and that the board would want you to be involved with it. And I know I certainly would have you involved in it, or Ms. Gillespie on project management experience and that sort of thing. I would suggest that if the board does it as a foreseen and considered idea, that if the best you can do and say, hey, we have this coming up, Mr. Watkins is asking for a board member to help him with this, that you'd all give a nod of assent to something like that. And then committees can get into difficulty when they try and make decisions that the full board should do. And matters that are programmatic or financial shouldn't be made by committees. They need to come back to the board for consideration. And also, just as a matter of convenience, they don't necessarily have to be meetings. They could be teleconferences, they could be emails, that sort of thing. And with those basic principles, I think that we don't have a need for committees right now, but when one comes up, if we think about it at a meeting in advance moving forward, that would be my suggestion on how to do committees. And those were my thoughts. Any thoughts on your part?
I guess the only thought I have is putting committee names, not necessarily the individuals, but somehow identifying these committee names.
Two committees that I think will be very obvious in coming up will have to do with finance and construction. And I think those two are two different areas of expertise. I think if you like this idea, we very much could think about what those committees could be.
Is that something everybody's agreeable to, finance and construction right now? Just so we can start. Spence, Leonard, Marie, go ahead.
I think design/construction, I think we gotta get it figured out what we wanna do before we start talking about constructing it.
How about the concept that if availability, so it need not be two members for each committee. It's whoever is interested or able to do it. Is that an okay principle, or do we want to try and divide it up to where everybody's got?
I'm okay with that. Board members, and Caroline, you okay with that?
Well, the committees can be composed of people outside of the board also?
Sure, I can help you with that. So it depends. You can have, I guess, what would be referred to as ex officio type members on your board or for certain committees. You could bring in experts. I don't know that they would actually technically be committee members, but they could be, I guess, kind of liaisons or certain things, but they wouldn't actually be official committee members. And we just have to be careful that we don't create a quorum of folks so that we, unless they want to be open public meetings. Otherwise, since it's a board of 5, we probably should limit each committee to 2, but unless you want to actually have formal open public meetings.
I guess I'm just thinking if there's a design construction board and I'm the only member of that board and I need help with something and I find a member of the community who's willing to help me, can I say, can you please go do this for me and bring it back to me?
Yes, I think you would ask the committee, I would like to bring on X person, and if the committee assents to it, then absolutely.
But I am the committee.
Would it be better call him a subject matter expert to help out?
Okay. Yeah, okay, that's what I'm looking for, just a helper.
Yeah.
Okay.
No issues with that from a bylaws perspective.
Yeah, I would think the more that we could reach out into the community and involve that's going to spread this as much more and we get expertise that we need. My issue is going to be in December, I'm not going to be here for this meeting in December proposed, and then we get into January, February, March, and April, which I'm typically out of state. But what I'm trying to do is to arrange so that we can identify our dates, and then I would come back each time for this meeting. And do that. I don't think it's fair to try to communicate 1,200 miles away and get a feel for what's going on. So that's my commitment coming back each time, and that's what I'm anticipating on doing. I come in the day before and leave the day after is kind of what I'm thinking on. So I just kind of tells where I'm at if I don't raise my hand to jump on something right away. But yeah.
And I appreciate the nods, thinking of Mr. Dietrich's case in particular. If everybody's understands that going up front, then that seems to solve that as a potential issue. One other thought I did have for a possible committee or role that the board might need to do is that as say, I'll call it a public ambassador. If any of you are on Rotaries or Kiwanis and want to talk about the project, I think that's also, that's a form of public outreach as well. So I think the board, probably more than one member of board, might not be something that we have to do meetings on and worry about quorum, but everybody can do public outreach on behalf of the board.
And you don't think you would be the best person for that committee?
I think I could go and help, and if we do get a chance to even more places to go and speak, it's probably helpful. I'll do whatever you ask me to do.
Yeah, I appreciate it. With that, the Speakers Bureau, will that evolve, say, as we get a little further into the design and maybe these committee the community meetings?
Mm-hmm, exactly.
Okay.
So with that, I've kind of sketched an outline. I'm not sure that's something we need to formally adopt as a measure. If I were to, though, share that in written form with the board members, would be what I outlined would be as an understanding for committees going forward. Is that fair?
I think, you're asking about the two committees specifically at this point?
I would just memorialize what we've talked about.
Okay.
And the principles and the reasons for a committee and some of the possible committees.
Sure, but I think perhaps it sounds like the emphasis would be on those, the design, construction, and the finance.
Will do.
Okay, very good.
That covers 9A, and 9B is just to confirm that this group, other than Mr. Dietrich, can meet these particular dates through February of next year.
Matt, are those our typical Tuesday?
The exception is the December one is a week early. It's a Tuesday before the one that was scheduled. Suggest that instead of the 20th, if that's okay with folks. The other two are actually on a Tuesday after a holiday, Martin Luther King Day and President's Day. City staff are here on each of those days, those. And with that, excuse me?
The council will meet on those nights as well.
Oh, okay, so we'll have to do an alternative.
No,
We'll be
just
meeting
ask me
before,
early.
okay. Well, the councils will be meeting on those Tuesday nights, but we just can't run into a 7 PM meeting.
We can do that.
Couple more things. Section C, I just mentioned that I've been accumulating lists of folks that might be able to help out. I mentioned one about an owner's representative. I should have mentioned before, gentleman Steve Nolan did a update for you some months or a year or so ago. And question mark, I think is, would you like to get an update on that using his services again?
Yes, I would like that. The other board members, you guys, okay? Everybody's okay with that? Yep. Yes, please.
I'll bring specific details then for the December meeting. There are a couple things to work out for him to be able to get the information that he needs from sources. And I'm hopeful also we might be able to get a little bit more information, possibly a little entry into what we might be able to bond out at what level.
And then perhaps for Mr. Nolan, if he could add some sort of an estimate of when phase 2 may be able to start. I think Zach and I had kind of guessed our way through that, but based upon his look, it might be useful for us.
I'll have to do some talking and negotiating with him to make sure that he's able to get that. He wanted to have it ready for this evening for you to be able to say, go forth for sure, but I need to talk with him just a bit more to get the details.
When he put together the first presentation, it was a pretty big worksheet. Is it possible you could ask him to put together some sort of an executive summary?
I could certainly ask.
Yeah, it was a lot, and
My guess, though, too, is that it will be more of an update format since you have been through it once before.
sure. But again, that executive summary might even be helpful for that.
The other resources I mentioned, I know that Mr. Morissette had asked about some local services last time about doing some pre-design. I'm a little bit hopeful that showing some examples of other facilities makes it so that we don't necessarily need to go out and go get a pre-design of our facility just yet, but did reach out, and there is, for example, Meyer Associates. I do have some prints out if you want to see a local company that has done a conceptual of an item and then what it actually looks like, kind of like the Linwood facility. They are locally available
And they've done some of that, this type of work,
not specifically aquatics facilities, but they have done.
but they have the resources, I guess.
Yes, absolutely. They did, for example, Port of Kennewick wine tasting building, a hangar at the Port of Pasco, Union Hall sort of thing. And I'm accumulating names from other entities too that'll come a little bit later in the process, designers and builders and that sort of things as well.
So Eric, just a little bit, it's off a little bit from the discussion we're in, but this might be the time to ask. Then, it's my understanding that a fire district, a PUD, perhaps a public facilities district, that these delivery models, is there some sort of an RCW out there that says we're supposed to use this specific delivery model, or is it open to us in terms of considering all four of these?
No, you'll have to comply with open public bidding and those requirements. There are some other statutes that allow other types of design build, and so there's some other statutes that have other alternatives. But because it's a public works, it will be a public works. But you're a municipal corporation, it will be a public works project and have to comply with public bidding and that process of. That's the starting point, and then there's some other ways, and that's where Steve Worley is really a fantastic resource because he.
So then all four of these are available to us then as a public facilities district? We're not limited by an RCW that says we can't do design build, or we.
You'd have to meet the requirements. There's a very specific process for design build that Steve has become an expert in from his experience with the new reservoir. But yeah, it is the starting point is that you typically go through the process of selecting an architect, going through an RFP process. You have to use A&E services. There's specific statutes that require public entities to use to obtain architecture and engineering services. Then after you go through that process, then the architect assists with putting together the documents for the bid package. At that point, then it goes out for public bidding and then goes through that process of responsible bidder.
And you'll keep us in that path.
Oh, yeah.
Very good.
Mr. Ferguson, and maybe said another way, if there are different flavors of entities in the state, I think there might be a couple of them that can do other models more easily than PFDs or cities, but we're not one of those. But by and large, PFDs are treated the same as the average municipality. Is that a fair way to
that's
say
a
it?
great summary of what I was trying to say. But yeah, no, that's absolutely the starting point. Will be there are some other statutes that we may be able to access because of the type of facility that we're trying to build. And we can look at that. Obviously, this is something new that I don't know of anything off the top of my head. We have a very specific set of statutes in 3557 that we're formed under, and they do give us some exceptions to other types of requirements. But this isn't one of them that, as a starting point, we would need to take that typical public works project model, but as the project manager just mentioned, that there's also some other areas that we might be able to see if those could be more beneficial. And Steve Worley, I think, mentioned some of those last time. But there's anytime you get outside, the only thing I would just say with that is anytime you get away from the starting point or status quo of public works contracting or bidding, you're going to really need to be very strict on what those other requirements are laid out in those statutes, because you're not doing the default, which is public works project bidding.
Okay, thank you. Excuse me. So then, Matt, does that finish up item C?
It does, and just the only other thing I would have to mention tonight is, we certainly had a bit of a theme tonight, and then suggesting a financial theme in December. Getting my crystal ball out, I would imagine January, potentially we're talking more about owners' representation or public outreach. We might get into more details about some of the requirements for bonding. Also mentioned too that I believe you'll have to do election of board officers, probably the January meeting makes that to reaffirm the board officers that you have currently. Looming meeting with the council, probably January does make more sense. February, can we get to the point where we're thinking about specific contract models, details, and designers, more pre-visualization, and also probably that question of siting. That's coming up in the coming months too. Don't know exactly when we'll need to make that choice, but that'll be coming up.
Okay, so everybody please put in your appointment book, your schedule regarding these meetings, December, January, and February. And then just one last item, if we're finished up, just one last item before we adjourn. I just wanted to pass out, this came from the Washington State Department of Revenue, and it went out to Pasco businesses that the sales tax increase is going to be in place. And it reads, the tax will be used for the purpose of funding public facilities. So that's just an FYI. Is there any
Mr.
other?
Morissette, may I get a copy of that for the record?
Sure.
Thank you. As well as the other handout that you handed out earlier this afternoon.
What's that?
May I also get a copy of the other handout?
Oh, of my,
thank you.
yeah. Yes.
I have another question for you, Matt. Were you able to get a copy of Microsoft Office?
Yes, or you mean project?
Or project, yeah?
Yes, I do have a copy of project.
Okay. And looking at the schedule that we had come up with a few months ago, it's not very realistic. Yeah, so I think we need to do a little bit of work to update it. And that means that our opening is going to need to be adjusted.
So Marie, are you saying we need a bigger piece of paper?
Well, I'm going to buy Matt a ream of 11 by 17 paper. For sure.
Let me get what was an Excel artifact over to a little bit better of a program here before the next meeting, and get that updated. But I think it's also fair to say we still got some decisions of which way we go here that are going to make it's a lot of crystal ball past a certain point. But if the utility of setting a date is important, then yeah, probably 2.5 years from now is probably a more realistic.
Yeah, well, as a person speaking from experience, if you don't put it on the schedule to force a decision date, then the decision will continue to slide.
Yeah.
So you have to pick a date and hold yourself accountable.
Let me do an update on that and adjust the date.
So, hey, Marie, then, the, what you have there that Matt has put together, does that mean, like, for example, I'm not quite sure how to ask this question, but the process, is it going to be expanded to include, like, when we're going to choose the owner's rep, and maybe when that first visual look is going to be ready?
Yeah, I think all of that detail could be put in, and you can do some project management magic and say, well, once you make this decision, then that allows this activity to happen, and you can show the flow. And then when you delay one decision, it will show you the outcome to the downstream.
So as the committee chair for the design, group, are you ready to meet with?
Actually,
you ready to meet with
that was
Matt
my
then?
line- That was gonna be my line, and Ms. Gillespie, may I contact you as a board representative and help me out with that a little bit?
Yes, actually, I was gonna talk to you after the meeting. I'll have some time the week of Thanksgiving that we could get together if you're in town.
Wonderful, we'll work on it and report back at the next December meeting with an update.
Very good. Is there any other business to come before the board? Go ahead,
Yeah,
Leonard.
just a question. I thought last month we spoke about the finance department and the city doing their budget and projections, and we were going to, at some point in time, know what the true dollar amount that was anticipated that would be able to be available under the projections that the city's working through right now.
Yeah, I think there are two pieces to that, and that's more engagement of the finance department in next month's meeting, but also some of it in Mr. Nolan's lap potentially as well.
Okay, if there is no other business, then the meeting will be adjourned, and we'll see everybody Tuesday, December the 13th at 4 p.m. here in the council chambers. All right, very good. Thank you.